I'm going to read to you an excerpt from Wild Hunt. Wild Hunt is a novella, and you can find it online in a book called Vampires, Darker Desires, an ebook containing 2 novellas. You can also find Wild Hunt as an ebook and a print book, and the links are below for finding it on Amazon and elsewhere. Okay, so what I have to tell you about the story is this. Lorelei is a young woman who reads tarot cards and also the crystal ball. She has some psychic abilities. She is also legally blind, meaning she can see a bit, but it's very hazy and indistinct images. Every year for the last couple of years, she's gone to a music festival in Germany, and she has a tent there, which the organizers help her set up, and she is able to have customers, and she reads cards and she reads the ball for them, and they are paying her money for this. So the festival is at an end, and she is about to leave. She's been packing up, and suddenly Lorelei felt a chill run up her spine. Still holding the 2 apples, she jolted upright. Now behind, she briefly heard the sound of the crowd rise in volume and then die, and with it the hairs at the nape of her neck rose. Someone had opened and closed the tent flap. Lorelei turned around, and her eyes in the dim candlelight let her see only a vague form standing just at the tent entrance, who looked like a shadow or a dark ghost. "Geschlossen," she said. She'd been born in Germany to a German father and an Irish mother, so she could speak 2 languages, and most of her clients spoke German or English. She'd also picked up a smattering of other languages, as did most Europeans. When she didn't get a response, she repeated what she'd said in French, Spanish, and finally in English said, "I'm closed." The guy, and she could sense that it was a guy, stood perfectly still. She had a vague image of long dark hair, black clothing, some metal glinting in the candlelight that might be chains hanging from parts of his outfit. In other words, he was dressed like most of the males here. "I want answers," he said, in English, which wasn't his first language. Her ear over the last week had attuned to many new accents, but his was not one of them. It had been a long week, and she was tired, but something about him just standing there told her that he was determined to get answers, and the quickest way around this would be to give him a reading and hope that the spiritual world would provide what he needed. She didn't think he was a druggie. He didn't admit the scent. In fact, he didn't have any scent. Her senses, other than sight, were sharp, mainly because she'd made an effort to develop them, and that included the 6th sense, ESP. "All right," she said, placing the apples on the cot and then moving her normal path toward the table. She took a seat on her chair, which faced the entrance. "Please," she said, "come in," gesturing to the chair opposite hers. He hesitated, but eventually moved into the tent and sat down. This close, she could see him better, although of course she still couldn't make out details, just that his eyes seemed as dark as his hair, his skin pale by contrast. He might be good-looking, she didn't know. Looks weren't at the top of her list of preferable traits anyway, since they don't matter if you can't see them. "I charge €10 for a reading. I read cards, which most people prefer. I also read the crystal." She nodded her head toward the large ball on the table between them. "Which would you like?" "I don't care." He sounded angry. "Then I'll choose for you," she said quickly, decided on the ball. "Put your hands here." She indicated that he should grip the ball on each side. When he didn't move, she added, "It's okay, it's safe, it won't hurt you." "It can't hurt me," he snapped. "I want answers." "I'll give you answers, but you have to participate. I can't do it alone." She could, of course, but this would be more accurate, and something told her she needed to be accurate for this reading. Finally, reluctantly, he put his hands on the ball, and she placed hers gently over his and nearly pulled away. It was like touching a block of ice. His hands were freezing. It was at least 30 Celsius outside and probably 28 inside the tent, and none of that explained this. "Your hands are cold," she said, hoping for an explanation. "I am always cold," he told her, which wasn't an explanation at all. Lorelei did not pursue it. She'd already felt the vibe of weirdness coming off him even before he sat down, and it was starting to unnerve her, so she decided to just do the reading and get it over with. Then she could get out of here and go home. Finally, she gazed down into the ball. At first she saw nothing, but that was normal. Many times the crystal hid its secrets, and she just had to be patient until it was ready to reveal something. But finally an image did form, swirling like a mist, and she let it speak through her. You are the youngest of 3 boys, your mother's favorite, but not your father's. She felt one of his fingers twitch. One of your brothers, there are only 2 of you left, you and your oldest brother. You don't get along. He's a corporate type. You're artistic, intuitive, emotional, creative, sensitive. She felt his fingers tense as he gripped the ball tighter. The swirling within the crystal picked up speed, and she wondered about that. Normally, images slowed down. Why this sped up she didn't know, but waited until something else formed that she could identify. And then she said, you have a problem, a big problem. You're searching for something or more someone. I see a lot of loss, pain, and anguish, and suddenly he leapt up, breaking contact with her, with the ball. His chair and the table fell over. The ball thudded onto the dirt. Before Lorelei could get to her feet, his cold hand grabbed her by the throat. He lifted her off the chair and then rapidly shoved her backward across the room until she crashed up against the back of the tent, braced by the tree that stood just behind that canvas wall. Lorelei pulled at his hand with both of hers, struggling to pry away his steely fingers. Her breath was cut off, and she fought for air, not able to get any into her lungs. Where is he? Came a voice as cold as the flesh. She tried to speak but couldn't, and he must have realized that and loosened his grip enough that she could gasp in a few breaths. Finally, she choked, Who? What are you talking about? Don't act stupid, you know. Please, I don't. Suddenly he threw her sideways, and she fell onto the cot. He was on her in a second, ripping the high lace collar of her Victorian-style blouse, exposing her throat. Now he had a smell, an overwhelming odor, coppery sharp. She couldn't be totally sure of what this was because it didn't make sense, but understood completely the instant his sharp teeth found her neck. And then, in a blindingly fractured second, he yelled as if he was being burned alive. His body repelled away from hers, shoved back hard by an invisible force. When he stopped, he took several steps further back and then stood perfectly still. What are you? He hissed in a low voice. Lorelei took a moment to get her breathing under control and to try to calm her body's trembling. She waited until her heart's rapid pounding slowed a bit and then sat up. She felt her neck, but there was nothing wet, no blood. He hadn't pierced the skin. Of course he hadn't. All the while he stood rooted to the spot, and she sensed him watching her. Finally, she stood on shaky legs. She edged past him to the table, which she managed to right, and her chair. The ball had rolled only a short distance and had stopped not too far from the table leg. Heavy crystal, it wouldn't break easily, although it might have chipped again. She sat down and stared into the crystal. The swirling image was as she had last experienced it, but now it slowed, and she was able to read what it was trying to tell her. Still staring into the ball, she said absently, Vampire, you can't have my blood, but you can have answers if you still want them. Sit down. She heard a low sound behind her, something between a hiss and a growl. It unnerved her, but she had experienced the worst. It couldn't really harm her. At least she didn't think so, if what her grandmother had told her was accurate, and so far it seemed to be. He was prideful, unaccustomed to taking orders or even suggestions. She didn't need the crystal to tell her that. But the swirling did mention that he was a prince in a long line of night creatures. Royalty, she thought. Dark, undead royalty, in need of answers, and he can only get them from a peasant like me. She smiled. It was going to be a long night. To be continued. So if you're interested in reading the story,